I don't know why I've never done a video about My Little Pony Tales, and it's time for me to fix that. For those who don't know, Tales is a one-season, 26-episode show that aired in 1992 on the tail end of G1. It is completely separate from the original G1 cartoon. It is the last of the pre-G4 cartoons that I finally sat down and watched because it didn't sound like something that would interest me. The characters are foals, maybe like 8 to 11 years old to throw out some numbers. They go to school, they do homework, they live very normal lives. The setting is modern and urban with almost no magic. But there is a little-known secret about Tales. It is the second best MLP cartoon after Friendship is Magic. I say best in a way that's like subjectively objective. Objectivity in analyzing fiction is pretty much a myth, because we all have our preferences and opinions. But there are some rules to writing, so I'll just say this. It's not my second favorite MLP cartoon, but it's the one that I think is second best in terms of its execution, especially its writing. I watched it all in a single go because it sucked me in despite my hesitations. It's the only MLP show where I can't really identify episodes that I would like to skip in a rewatch. So, what makes it work? Well, tell me if this sounds familiar. It is a slice-of-life show with episodes that feature character-centric conflicts driven by the flaws of a set of main characters whose personalities are well-defined and diverse. Yeah, it's basically Friendship is Magic, but just the slice-of-life stuff. There are actually a few FIM episodes that I think are based on Tales episodes, or at least they happen to follow a lot of the same story beats, and generally I think the Tales episodes are better written. The episodes are only 10 minutes long, which leads to pretty tight pacing that works in its favor more often than not. The strongest point of the show is probably the characters. All 7 main characters have pretty neat personalities falling into an established archetype, but usually having some extra features. They have flaws, they have goals. The show doesn't really run long enough for them to change much, but they do make mistakes and learn lessons from them, so it really deserved more than one season, honestly. Let's take Bon Bon as an example. She is the foodie. She loves to cook and shares with her friends. She's also constantly eating, and it's hilarious.
How did you eat a whole week's supply of food in one afternoon?
Easy. I was hungry.
But she also wants to be a model, and she lacks the confidence to really go for it at first. Not a typical conflict for the foodie character. She also keeps a detailed diary that becomes relevant to the plot of several episodes. She goes through a lot of relatable conflicts during the show, like cheating on a test and feeling guilty about it, or getting duped by a guy who she likes into giving up a secret recipe. She's well-rounded, literally. She has flaws, she has goals, she brings several valuable contributions to her friend group. This is a good character, and they're all like that. Since it only had one season, there's not a lot of focus on characters besides the core 7. The best developed besides them are 3 boys who go to class with them. Maybe now would be the time to mention that Tales actually gets a ton of flack on the internet from so-called reviewers who nitpick the show while missing the broader points. The boys get a lot of criticism because people say they're portrayed as irredeemable and inferior to the girls. I don't agree. I think Tales does male characters better than early Friendship is Magic, in fact. Only one of them is really irredeemable. One of them is an absolute angel, so this criticism falls apart immediately. And the other is kind of a jerk, but also has some redeeming qualities. There's not just one kind of boy here. The characters of both genders do fall into some gender stereotypes, but that's not necessarily portrayed as being a good thing. For example, Lancer and Bright Eyes like each other. As an aside, there are several romantic relationships that get explored in this show, and they are very young to be getting serious, but it doesn't really get serious. It's more of a schoolgirl crush sort of thing. It's not like they kiss or anything. Anyway, Bright Eyes and Lancer's friends convince them to act in these stereotypically girlish and boyish ways to try to attract the attention of their counterparts, and that ends up falling flat on its face until they act like their true selves. Is this a sexist episode that reinforces gender stereotypes? No, of course it's not. That's another thing that gets criticized a lot. The lessons in the episodes. You can't see this, but I'm putting lessons in quotes, and I'll explain why. I've seen reviewers act like everything they do in this show is supposed to be taken as some kind of life lesson. First, a lot of their childish behaviors don't really work out and are portrayed as more of a flaw or something that they need to grow out of, like I was just explaining with Lancer and Bright Eyes. Second, most episodes don't go out of their way to clearly state some sort of Aesop like early Friendship is Magic does. There are a few exceptions, and some of them are actually really interesting points, but anyway, that's not the norm. Third, even when the characters don't seem to have learned their lesson and the conflict is resolved through immature behaviors, it's important to remember that they are children. They act like children. We aren't meant to take them as role models. They're not career-holding adults who physically embody some crucial element of harmony like the main 6. This is why I think Tales gets way more flack than it deserves for its allegedly questionable life lessons. I will acknowledge one facet of the show that gets particularly criticized a lot, and that's Sweetheart's relationship with Teddy. He shows some abusive behaviors and doesn't show much interest in changing or being redeemed. He's a lot like Discord in that way. Sweetheart smothers him with unrelenting, unconditional kindness in much the same way that Fluttershy does with Discord, and that's the only time we really see him do something that could make him seem redeemable. How much tolerance to show a bad person who's not really interested in changing is a complex subject. I'm not going to say that Sweetheart is completely in the wrong for repeatedly forgiving Teddy, but he does raise some serious warning flags that make me hope this schoolgirl crush fades out with time as they usually do. This is a relationship that just doesn't hold up as well as I'd like. I've already talked about the writing a lot, but I just want to emphasize that for the most part, it's really good. And the winner is basically just a better version of the Ticketmaster. Who's Responsible has this really bold message about how we all contribute to the environmental crisis, and it's irresponsible to shunt all the blame onto these large corporations when we can all do things to reduce our impact. Up, Up, and Away drops these magical ponies into the show out of nowhere, turning it into a one-episode urban fantasy and leaving fans thirsting for their foreshadowed reappearance that never came. This show deserved more than one season, I swear. These episodes have a lot of rewatch value. There are few, if any, that I would choose to skip. From a more technical standpoint, the production value of Tales is superior to the original G1 show, but still far behind where G3 would be a decade later. The animation is smoother than the 80s show, but there are still some errors. The background music is alright. Every episode has a song, and most of them range from forgettable to bad. There are a few good ones, and there is exactly one great one.
Sweet music, ooh, sweet music. I love the sound when you're around. Sweet music, ooh, sweet music. Beautiful harmonies abound.
It is an absolute earworm, and fun fact, Melody is voiced by Kelly Sheridan. There is one thing about this show that really bothers me, and that's how anthropomorphized they are. They live in the human world. Literally, in fact. Everything is built for creatures with 2 legs and fingers, and despite their rather horsey G1 design, the characters stand up on 2 legs to do pretty much anything besides walk, and it haunts me. It just looks wrong. There are some images from this show that I want to erase from my memory. But they are really cute when they're on 4 legs, and these designs have the edge over the original G1 cartoon in that their main styles are much more varied. I also take some issue with the basic premise of Tales, namely the lack of fantasy elements. I think fantasy is in the DNA of My Little Pony, and it's part of what made the brand appealing in the first place. G1 shifted its strategy quite a lot in the later years, straying away from the epic Tolkien-esque vibes of the early years into, well, Tales. While it's a great show, I think about it less than the 80s cartoon because fantasy is just part of the brand for me. Imagine this same sort of slice-of-life character-focused show, but set in a fantasy world where the magical elements can interact with the story in interesting ways. Oh wait, that's Friendship is Magic, and that's why Friendship is Magic is the best one. One other criticism, Tales aired exclusively in North America. Meanwhile, the toys of these characters released exclusively in Europe. They're almost impossible to collect these days because everyone wants them and so few were made. If the point of an MLP cartoon is to sell toys, then you are getting kids excited about toys that their parents would have to cross the Atlantic Ocean to buy. No wonder MLP struggled in the 90s. So, I think that's it. Tales is a show with a setting that I don't really like and production values that had increased but were still far from today's standards. But that don't matter because the writing is superb. It's a slice-of-life show with character-focused conflicts, and the main characters are about as interesting as a group of school-going children can be after only a single season of development. Honestly, it kinda slays. It's like what Equestria Girls should have been. Peace out.